morning, YouTube. Tire Metalhead Weatherman here. Hopefully, you guys are doing well. First off, I want to start by saying thank you to everyone who told my mom happy birthday. She appreciates it a bunch. Also, like I said, presenting the birthday gift of 500 subs to her was also pretty cool, too. That's what she wanted me to do for her, but we, of course, took her out somewhere to east. But as much as I'd love to talk about that, that's not really that important right now. Do have a weather situation ongoing right now, so we're going to go ahead and get into it, or a potential weather situation about to come into play here. But we do have an enhanced risk issue today across the Northeast for severe weather, pretty much stretching from Pittsburgh all the way to Scranton and parts of southern New York. New York City, you are outside of this, but you are in a slight risk. So we do need to be on the lookout for you guys as well, and into the Ohio Valley as well. And even towards Boston, where you're in that marginal risk, we need to look out for you guys too, because weather models have been a little bit sketchy. We've been kind of off the mark a little bit with that. So just definitely, even if you're in the marginal risk, you do need to be on the lookout because there could be a couple of big storms in the way. Also, we have to look at this particular summertime setup over here, over towards the southeast and around Tennessee, where we could see severe storms early in the day, transitioning through the afternoon. A few of these storms could contain some damaging winds. In fact, wind is going to be the main threat today, and I'll show you that chart in a minute. And then, of course, with a low amplitude shortwave here developing across the south central plains, that's going to be another area of interest. As far as the wind threat's concerned, that's the main threat. It's our enhanced risk driven event. And then, of course, over towards the southeast, we watch there. And then also towards the south central plains too. Then also the hail threat. We have a hatch that's popped up here over towards Binghamton, Scranton, and heading back towards the Great Lakes, or the eastern half of them. And then, of course, the rest of these areas are at marginal risk at best. Do have a 5% torr threat that exists, mainly across the Pennsylvania and New York line. Does kind of sneak back towards eastern Ohio, Cleveland. You are not in the 5%, but you are in the 2%, so definitely be on the lookout there. So that being said, it could be an active day. Do plan to go live to cover this one, especially since I didn't get to do any live coverage yesterday because of reasons. But that being said, it's going to be an interesting setup when we look at things. Did a little bit of poring over data before we got started here, but looking at 700 millibars here, this is where our main threat, this is where our threat really starts to organize itself and become apparent. We do have this shortwave trough that's popped up here just north of the border, and this is what's going to be the main catalyst behind our action here in the Northeast in particular. We do have a short mesoscale event over here towards the southeast. That's going to be the reason behind our storm development there. And then, of course, we have to watch this low amplitude shortwave that develops here over towards the central plains here. I'm really thinking Kansas is going to be the main state that gets most of the storms, I would say, based off of what I've been seeing on the models here. So we'll go ahead and shift over to 850 millibars, so that way we can get a look at our low-level jet here. This is what a lot of the weather community considers as tornado juice, or just severe weather juice in general, along with CAPE. But it's not a bunch of low-level jet energy out here. We do see some pockets where we're getting up to about 20 knots plus. Still a little bit questionable as to the timing and how that ends up developing here. Here's a good sounding as well. This is a decent torr sounding, solid low-level jet, like I said, towards 0 to 2 kilometers. We're at about close to 20 knots. Like I said, it's nothing incredible, but the parameters are definitely there for severe weather. Decent instability. Good looking skewed C chart here. Storm relative velocity, or storm relative helicity, wow, I can't believe I messed that up, is sufficient. Everything looks like it's in the right spot that it would need to be for severe weather. It is slightly elevated though, so that could come into play as well. Also, taking a look at this, you also have significant hail analogs. Damaging wind threat as of right now at this point is a little bit lower. So I'm going to guess as of right now by 23Z, which would be about 5, 6 o'clock this time, that's when we're more likely to see discrete storms. I do see this eventually congealing into a squall line-esque event, and as a result, we'll probably see that damaging wind threat ramp up later into the evening. So that being said, this is earlier in the afternoon. Storms are probably just going to start to fire around this time across the northeast here. It's really the southeast that'll be the one that starts to show here. And then as we go forward, we do start to see those increasing cloud tops begin to develop, and that's indicated by these brighter colors here. Once these storms start to go, it's going to pretty much almost act like a trigger mechanism for these new storms to form. Usually it looks like it almost forms on the outflow boundaries based off of this here. So here's our big MCS that could develop over here towards the southeast. I do think storms will be a little bit more scattered than what this is indicating. And then, of course, later into the evening, we have to watch towards the panhandles of Texas, Oklahoma, Colorado, and parts even northeastern New Mexico, too. So as we get later into the evening, storms really start to ramp up over here towards western Kansas. Storms are going to start to die out a little bit over here towards the southeast. Further off to the south, you may still get some pretty good activity as well. And by late evening, most of the storms, or the most severe storms, could and should be out of the northeast by this point. And then this MCS is going to progress its way into eastern Kansas, Missouri, and this will also help set the stage for tomorrow's severe weather event, which we'll talk about tomorrow morning. So last but not least, we'll look at what our instability is looking like, maybe even the bulk shear and a couple other things. But this is where we get into the really interesting severe weather side. So CAPE is a great measuring stick for instability. As far as our area is concerned, by 18Z across this region here, see plenty of potential for severe weather here across Alabama in particular. CAPE values are really high, especially at the surface, where we're looking at over 6,000 joules per kilogram, actually 6,100 joules per kilogram. We got pretty formidable damaging wind potential here too, with the D CAPE being indicated here at 881 joules per kilogram. Put in perspective, threshold is usually about 800 as a minimum to really start honing in on that threat, and we're well past that at this point. There's also other indicators on here. I could spend an hour probably going over this, probably even longer than that if anything. But just based off all the indicators that I see here, damaging wind potential is actually really high. Could also see some hail with this too. It's not like it's terrible here with the lapse rates. They aren't incredibly steep, but they're notable. But especially looking at the significant hail parameter here, we're at 0.8. So that's interesting to see. So don't be surprised if you see hail here over towards, let's say, maybe Birmingham or something, or maybe even towards Huntsville. But watch what happens as we get later into the evening here. We do see a little bit of instability over here towards New York here and Pennsylvania. Not an abundant amount of CAPE at the mix layer, but towards the surface could be a little bit different of a story. Actually, it's lower. That's interesting. Sounding slightly contaminated, but this is indicative of a little bit more of a tornado threat. And this kind of plays into it a little bit more. You don't want a lot of CAPE because that will make too explosive an environment for storms. And tornadoes tend to be stronger in some cases, usually whenever the storms are, or in most cases when the storm is discrete. But I think we're already might be looking into an actual storm that will be indicated on radar. So there is a little bit of contamination. It's minimal, but it does kind of put me a little bit more on the fence with things. As far as the sounding is concerned, though, it's still pretty good. Also, a good indicator of tornado potential is whenever you look at this here, this little loopy thing here, it's called a hodograph, is whenever you look at the lower levels, you see this 0, 1, 2, 3. Whenever you see this get up past 20 knots, that's usually a decent indicator. When you see it get past 30 or 40 knots, that's when it's a real eye-opener. Because usually you'll see a little loop, something like this. I'm going to try to draw it as best as I can. You see something like that. You see the numbers 1, 2, and so on and so forth. That's when you have to be on the lookout. That being said here, let's go ahead and finish out the map here. we'll see the cape really start to build a little bit more over towards Kansas later into the evening. And then, of course, as that MCS moves forward, it's going to eat up all the cape that's over there, because this is pretty much what you would call thunderstorm fuel. As far as the bulk shear setup for today, like I said, I really would expect more so the greatest amount to be over towards the northeast, especially earlier in the afternoon. You definitely kind of see an indicator of that here. We're seeing bulk shear of up to about 50 knots here, so some good indicators there. Everywhere else, you're not going to see quite as much. You may see a little bit pop up here as we get into the evening and overnight hours. Like I said, this is really going to be a good segue to get into tomorrow's threat. Of course, that video is going to be coming later. So with that being said, I guess the last thing we can do is go ahead and look at what the radar could look like today. This is what composite reflectivity is, and this also shows a little something extra here. This shows what's called updraft helicities, anything above 75 meters squared per second squared. It's usually a good indicator for severe weather. So if you start to see these little streaks pop up here and there, definitely need to be on the lookout here. So storms start to fire across both of these regions by about maybe 3 or 4 o'clock, I would say. And they really start to ramp up by the time we get towards 7 to 8 o'clock here. After that, the threat does start to die off as we lose that daytime heating. And our secondary area pops up over here towards Kansas, Oklahoma in particular. And then we'll see this, of course, form into an MCS. And this could set up the stage for our tomorrow's severe weather event. Towards the southeast, where we also had that severe weather threat, I think we're going to be mainly dealing with the potential being earlier into the day. And then starting to die out once we get later into the evening. Could be an increased chance for additional severe over here towards Georgia towards the early part of the evening. But right now it's just a marginal risk, so there's still a little bit of uncertainty with that. So definitely need to be keeping an eye on things here. That being said, hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, you know what to do. Hit that like button, smash that subscribe button. Make sure you get that bell on if you do subscribe, or if you are already subscribed, make sure you're notified of every video. And of course, hit that share button. Try to see if we can get this information out to as many people as we can. That being said, hope you enjoyed the video. Again, it's Metalhead Weatherman here. Take care and have a nice day.